Good morning, everyone, and welcome to SPACC Live, Public Policy Conversations. The next couple of weeks, SPACC will be hosting this series of policy webinars, a quick half-hour conversation with East Metro policymakers at multiple levels of government. Questions can be submitted during the webinar by clicking the question button at the bottom of your screen. Our host is Shannon Watson, Director of Public Affairs of the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce, and our featured guest today is Roseville Mayor Dan Roe.
Thanks, Evie, and welcome everybody. It's our pleasure to be here today and bring this conversation right to you, wherever you are, in your office, in your living room, in your pillow fort, whatever works. Mayor Roe, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here today.
Awesome. I'm going to jump right into questions if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, great. So how has the city of Roseville changed its operations to keep people safe and still get the business of local government done?
We've done a number of things, starting even before the official stay-at-home order. We had the city manager and staff had decided that it made sense to close City Hall and city facilities to the public in order to protect members of the public, as well as the city employees who are serving members of the public. Because it was really impossible to practice, good social distancing or physical distancing when you're trying to help somebody across a counter with a license center transaction, or when you're trying to work with the contractor on their application for a building permit, across the counter once again. And so we started with that. We did then go through a process of canceling pretty much all of the events that were scheduled to be in our park buildings or our Parks and Rec programs that involved groups of people getting together. Clearly that couldn't be happening. And so that was the first step. We've also now, I think almost all the city employees other than public safety folks are working from home. We have our public works folks on call to be able to respond to water main breaks and things like that, which still happen during pandemics, it turns out. Our detectives are able to do their investigations from home, for instance, in the police department, but we do still have, of course, our patrol folks out on the streets and doing their normal job, and we still have our firefighters and emergency medical folks still doing their shifts, working from the fire station. So we've done, a lot of changes that a lot of other people are doing to respond. We just this week reopened some transactions at our license center so people can renew their tabs and do some other title type transactions by dropping the information in a Dropbox, and then the staff will process the transaction and mail it back to folks. So some of those things are happening. We've had pretty active work with building permits still going on and doing, inspections of projects with our building inspectors. Obviously, once again, practicing safe practices with physical distancing and wearing masks and things like that. So those are the changes that we've made, and I'm sure virtually every other public entity across the region has made as well.
We're all sort of learning how to do things together and taking ideas from each other and finding best practices and stuff. And you just had your first all virtual council meeting this week, correct?
That's correct, and it went off pretty well. We weren't any more clunky probably than a normal council meeting goes. We had to get used to the ability to transact over this interface, which is a little different. Although some of my council members might observe that it was easier for me to see when they wanted to speak, because they would raise their hand on the screen, right. Whereas when they're all next to me, I have to look sideways to catch them if they're raising their hand. So this was a little bit easier that way. Although I will say they didn't avail themselves of the raise hand feature in Zoom, but this worked pretty well.
That's awesome. Evie and I had joked that we're all going to put TV producer on our resumes by the time we go back to whatever normal is going to be, because we're all learning the technology together.
Right.
So in your role as a mayor, how are you working with other levels of government in the decision-making processes?
Well, it's not too much different than it has been, even prior to the pandemic here. Probably just a little more intense. I know I don't get to be on conference calls with Senator Klobuchar on a routine basis normally. I don't know why I don't get the invitations, but we'll leave it at that. But we
Note
did.
to Klobuchar's office.
There's not a direct hotline, no, from my mayor's office to there, but they did invite me to participate, and a number of other suburban mayors last week in a call. They had calls scheduled with our inner city mayors, Mayor Carter and Mayor Fry, but they wanted a separate call with some of the suburban mayors, and so Mayor Spano of St. Louis Park, Mayor of Richfield, and a couple of other mayors were on the call with us. And that was a good opportunity to talk about, some of the impacts that we have locally and some of the needs that we might have from the federal level, both during the pandemic and then on the other side of it as well. And one of the things I emphasized was, funding for mental health. We have a lot of seniors in Roseville. We have a lot of folks who are, at home anyway, but all those issues just get magnified when folks are at home and dealing with also, something that's affecting everybody and causing a lot of their contact with the outside world to change. And so that was something, along with all the other issues that we have out there with workers' comp, for firefighters and police officers and the COVID infections and things like that. But that was one that I really wanted to emphasize, with our federal representatives about, we're going to need to deal with that coming out of this on the other side.
Absolutely. In the business community, we've been talking a lot about the upcoming property tax payments. And businesses, some whom are a little nervous about their ability to pay those on May 15th. So I know there have been multiple levels of conversation. So the counties are obviously the collectors of those payments, but then they disperse them to cities and other units, local units of government. Are you having that conversation at all?
We've definitely, city manager, treasurer, and I early on had a conversation about that and what we need to be paying attention to out there as we see potential legislation at the legislature or potential decisions by counties. I know just in the news recently was a decision by Hennepin County to essentially waive their late penalties for people who pay late on in their May payment. And, I think that makes some sense for folks who are having the difficulty with making their payment. I know it sounds like there's an exception for folks who may have already sort of, made their payment essentially through contributions to their escrow account. And so, our understanding right now is that depending on what those decisions end up being, it's most likely the city would continue to get, a good chunk of our property tax payment that we get after that May timeframe. As folks may know, cities and school districts and the county through property tax payments get paid essentially twice a year, half one payment and half the other payment. And for our, $52 million city budget in Roseville, property tax represents approximately between a third and a half of that budget. And so, a $9 or $10 million payment once a year, and then a $9 or $10 million payment another time during the year, that's a significant chunk of our budget. And certainly if we don't have that revenue coming in, we really have to look at how we handle our cash flows. And, most cities, and Roseville is no exception, we have a fund balance that we set aside specifically by policy to handle those contingencies where for some reason we don't get that property tax payment. But those set-asides are also intended to be used for other contingencies we have that might be related to the same issue that's causing the property tax to be delayed. And so it reduces our flexibility to use those funds that are sort of in our savings account for perhaps some assistance to businesses or assistance to residents that might be helpful, in also dealing with the pandemic. So there's sort of two sides to the coin, and we certainly understand, the issues with people's ability to pay. Certainly in Roseville, and this might set up a follow-up question, but we have a lot of retail and a lot of service, businesses, restaurants and hotels that contribute to our tax base. And so we know a lot of them are significantly down in revenue.
Yep, that was a thought I had. So much of Roseville is retail, is restaurants, is hospitality. That's a huge part of your economy. How can people help prop up that part of the Roseville community?
Well, there's no question that that's an impact, and we see it acutely here. I know our Roseville Visitors Association at visitroseville.com has information about how people can support local restaurants, and also information about which local hotels are still, having rooms available for people, and making them available, for instance, for health professionals who may need that ability to go to a hotel rather than home between shifts and things like that. Certainly getting gift cards, certainly getting takeout or delivery where available, and generously tipping those folks that are providing the delivery and takeout is something that can help support those restaurants. But I think we've seen some preliminary numbers just out in the news that there's going to be a significant impact, and there's no denying that. No amount of carryout and no amount of delivery and buying gift cards is going to impact the big change that we've had. And so people just need to continue to do whatever they can. But obviously there's needs out there that are going to have to be met by the state and federal folks in support packages that they can provide. And it's I think we all appreciate this initial round that has been passed by Congress, as well as by our state legislature. But there's no question, I think, that we've got some longer term impacts that we're going to be dealing with for many months to come into 2021, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I know the idea of letting restaurants who have a liquor license sell beer and wine to go as part of those carryout orders is something that the legislature is talking about. Has Roseville taken a position on that?
We haven't taken an official position on that. I think it's fair to say that we're generally supportive of those types of measures, especially on a temporary basis to help get through. Certainly, there's a whole other conversation about whether that should be a permanent change, and can be had at an appropriate time. But at this point, I think we're just supportive of whatever can be done to give that type of relief to our businesses.
Awesome. Well, while the pandemic has obviously literally changed the world, there were priorities and policy opportunities and stuff that were going on before all of this started. So what other kinds of things are you continuing to work on as a city?
We are in the midst of a couple of environmental reviews for some major developments in the city, and we've been keeping tabs, maybe not on a daily basis. We don't want to be too much of a pest, but certainly on a routine basis with those projects to make sure they are going on. One of them is the major expansion at Roseville. And with the changes to retail, I think we can see why there might be a potential for them to delay that project. Right now, things are moving. Their environmental review is in a 30-day comment period that ends, I think, later this month. And the intention is to bring those comments and that decision making forward to the council early in May still. So we're very encouraged by that. We're encouraged by the fact that housing projects are continuing to go on. I think some of the sites I've seen have throttled back some of the work and changed some of their schedules with their workers on site just to deal with some of that, physical distancing and things like that. But we're encouraged by that. We've been, doing, like I said, building inspections still. So we see a lot of that going on. We are engaged with the Rice and Larpenteur Alliance process still. And in fact, that's the topic of our next Wednesday's Roseville Maplewood Virtual Business Council. Yep. So I would definitely encourage folks to sign up for that, to learn more about that. But we've been meeting virtually to keep that process moving forward, and we really appreciate everybody continuing to be engaged. We're actually right now encouraging people to do sort of the neighborhood cleanup effort. Each spring for the last couple of years, we've scheduled a cleanup day to get out and pick up trash in that area, and because we can't do that the same, we've been this week encouraging people to get out and do sort of a one by one type of cleanup and post pictures and information on our the Alliance's Facebook page. So that's been good to see out there and going on. So that's what some of the things we've been doing to try to keep our priorities moving forward while this is going on.
Yeah. That project in particular is something that's really interesting and really sort of innovative. I know the joint meeting of the Roseville Business Council and the Maplewood Area Business Council is just sort of an offshoot of that. If we're talking about Rice-Larpenteur, absolutely we should get those two groups together, because the three cities have come together in a way that I don't know if there's another project like that in the country. Do you know?
Well, it's very unique from all we've heard from everybody who's sort of come in and been involved, maybe from other entities outside of this area. There's really not a lot of examples out there, especially with the combination of the different governmental units coming together. And so we definitely want to keep that momentum going. We've been encouraged by some prospective development projects that might happen in that area that are a part of this. And so we want to once again make sure that we're keeping those things moving.
Yep.
Because certainly the residents need and deserve that attention and that effort.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we usually talk about change as a bad thing, but because we all like change if we do the change. If anybody else is changing us, we're like, oh no, we don't like that. But has there been anything new or different that you've taken from this experience so far that might be an opportunity for a good change once we're done with all of this?
I think there's a couple things. The first is just how much we've seen individuals and organizations in the community take on their own, doing things to help others. And certainly we don't want to encourage that to stop after this pandemic ends. So anything that we can do to keep that going as a city, I think we want to investigate and understand that. The other thing is that a lot of this virtual meeting effort has opened up, at least my eyes, to different ways of getting more people involved that might not have otherwise been involved. Just an example, because I work in sort of the northeast corner of the metro, have not been able to go to in-person meetings of the Regional Council of Mayors, which meets on a monthly basis over in downtown Minneapolis. It's just impossible for me to get enough time from my day job to go do that. But I was able to participate in the first one in about a year and a half through a virtual interface. And so those are ways that I think we can encourage, especially that interaction amongst people in different levels of government and different geographical locations to work more together than maybe a lot of in-person meetings is able to do. And so, maybe we're going to have to add the virtual component to our in-person meetings and open houses and things like that, just as a way to engage people that can't be there in person. And so that's one thing I've taken away just off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm. And in a state like Minnesota, where sometimes the travel can be challenging because of weather or because of distance, we have found that a lot of our webinars like this, people really enjoy being able to be part of a conversation that they otherwise wouldn't necessarily be able to if they had to go to something. And I've definitely felt like, because I go to a lot of meetings as well, like there's a lot of extra time on my calendar that would otherwise be drive here and drive here. And I know it's been a little bit of a cost savings for our organization without having to pay for mileage. So. And
snacks.
That's true. Everybody is responsible for their own snacks. Okay, well, Mayor Roe, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, even without the travel time, to be part of this conversation. As you mentioned, that conversation next Wednesday morning, 7:30, about Rice-Larpenteur Alliance, and you're on the panel, correct?
I'm on the panel, yes.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, we will let you go, get back to your day. Thank you so much again. Evie, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Thank you, Mayor Roe and Shannon. This session was recorded and will be available at a later date posted on our website. For more information on SPACC Live public policy conversations and other SPACC events, please refer to our calendar at stpaulchamber.com. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on social media. We'll see you next Wednesday, hopefully, at the next council meeting. Have a good one today.
Bye.